Good evening, Shortcut. Stephen here. This is video 1 for the price list that will go out on Wednesday, October 11th at 9 p.m. as always. This is funk, jazz, soul, and soundtrack list, and it goes out to my dad, JP, who passed away today 2 years ago. All right, well, I debated quite hard about what the lead-off record of this particular selection should be, but because by complete happenstance I'm wearing my JB's Pass the Peas t-shirt, the JB's Food for Thought, which includes Pass the Peas and maybe their greatest ever hit, Gimme Some More. Regular shortcutters will know the devotion with which I hold the JB's. James Brown's backing band, albeit it was a pretty malleable thing. On this particular record, which was their, I think, either first or second record, maybe first. This is a compilation of some singles and things that they did as part of James Brown and the JB's. But it's effectively two bands, because there was an original JB's that didn't quite cut the mustard, and then they were replaced by a bunch of musicians that James already had relationships with. So the likes of Fred Wesley on trombone, or Carl Stubblefield on drums, one of the greatest groove drummers that ever lived. He's such an ego, James Brown. He describes himself, I don't know if you can see this, if I focus right in, James Brown, the creator. James Brown, the creator, produced by James Brown, all songs arranged by James Brown, 1972. These are the JB's. Now this is a Japanese press. It is awesome. I love this record. From the second when you drop the needle on this, and you just hear Carl and Fred and the boys just chanting, "Pass the peas, pass the peas." It's just amazing. Hot Pants Road, the grunt that finishes side 1 is an absolute banger. And then, you get songs like the theme from King Heroin, which is a kind of an interesting instrumental. I love this record. It's seriously hard to find. As those of you know, I only find it very, very rarely. Actually, the way this normally works is the guys in Shibuya, they know that I love JB's music. And if they find something, they stick in the box. And that is the case with this one. It arrived and I had no idea it was going to be there. And when I saw it, I was like, flip, I said. Yeah, I love this record. I love that record. And this is the one I was debating with. This was inaugurated into the Jazz Hall of Fame in 1999, which to my mind is about 25 years later than it should have done. This is Herbie Hancock's 5th record, Maiden Voyage. As you can see, it's still in the shrink wrap. It still has the Obi sticker. Herbie Hancock, Freddie Hubbard on trumpet, George Coleman on tenor sax, Herbie on piano, Ron Carter on bass, and the amazing Anthony Williams on drums. Maiden Voyage, the opening track, and title track has been covered by the great and the good. It's kind of the cusp between Herbie's pure jazz period and how he became the progenitor of jazz fusion. It is not a fusion record in any way. It is purely a jazz record on the Blue Note label, recorded by Rudy Van Gelder, of course. But it's incredibly melodic and it's just a record you put on, grab a glass of wine, and just let it wash over you. And this copy is fantastic. It's the 1985 4000 series. You see the Blue Note 4000? Really highly regarded. Beautiful, beautiful vinyl quality. Yeah. Highly recommended, my friends. Another shortcut royalty figure is the wonderful Fenton Robinson. Fenton Robinson, Chicago Blues, typically recorded on the Alligator label. The two that I get quite regularly, Somebody Loaned Me a Dime, and I Heard the Blues Downstairs. Many of you have picked those two records up, and rightfully so. His voice is velvet, and his guitar playing is subtle, supple, and melodic. He was called the mellow genius for good reason. And in fact, on this record, 1973's The Getaway, the second track, Mellow Fellow, is by far my favorite. He's like, is the distillation of everything that is truly wonderful about Fenton Robinson. It's indescribably cool. The wonderfully kind of fluid guitar tones on this song about basically chilling out for the afternoon. It's great. The opening track and lead-off track, The Getaway, it's about as lively as it gets. It's man, I love Fenton Robinson. She's a Wiggler is probably his most unfortunate song title. There he is on the back. Really beautiful copy. This often's pretty beat up and not in very good shape. This is the Japanese press on Luna Records. It's not Alligator though. It's Vivid, and I've done some research. I'm not quite sure how he ended up recording something that wasn't on Alligator, but I'm glad he did because it's great. Now this next record, I'm pretty sure I've never had this before. Certainly never on a list, not on a video. There are very, very few soundtracks that have basically won the big four, and I'm not going to be able to remember them all, but it's BAFTA, Oscar, Grammy, and one other that I knew was going to escape me. And it's a very, very rare beast that does so. Although you won't be too surprised to hear that it's John Williams who managed to pull this feat off. This particular movie was the movie that the teachers in Northern Ireland would play when it was raining outside and you had to sit in the canteen, eat your lunch and wait for classes to begin, and it was paying it down, which was quite regularly. And they had a TV that they would wheel out, and everyone would settle down every so often and they would just say, all right, we're just going to put a movie on. Imagine, you're in your class, you're eating your lunch, and they put a movie on. And it was often this movie, E.T. I've seen, and so therefore, I've seen this movie an inordinate amount of times. And One of the great pleasures I had last year was watching my kids, Finbar and Ailish, watching E.T. for the first time. It was like stereo. The movie was great, so kind of one eye on the movie and one eye on them. As they learn about the creature and its intelligence and its gifts, but also what adults are capable of. The faceless policeman that Spielberg cuts off at waist height, all you see is their gun belt. The voices, the medics and doctors in the suits, so you never see their face. All you hear is kind of the distended voices. The fact that the adults are always portrayed from with an angle looking up, making them look foreboding and giant. And what they try to do to E.T. And watching the tears is what happened. And then they're leaping around with that extraordinary denouement. I mean, it's amazing. And the thing about this soundtrack is that once you listen to it as its own entity, you recognize that it is everywhere in the movie. I read somewhere that there's almost 80 minutes of just the music playing as a scene happens, and no dialogue over the top, just the music, which is a really large, really significant amount. And there's lovely little motifs that, as you get to know this soundtrack, you'll start to figure them out. So I really like the soundtracks to the Star Wars movies, particularly The Empire Strikes Back, which are also John Williams. But there's a scene in E.T. where E.T. sees Yoda, and there's almost this little play on whether there's a recognition there, and John Williams subtly weaves in a little chunk of the soundtrack to Empire Strikes Back into the soundtrack for E.T. It's a beautiful thing. So this record's the Japanese first press in amazing condition, and it has a really delightful kind of trifold insert. Unfortunately, and kind of atypically, it's all in Japanese, but you can see there they've got little character portraits. And of course I can't translate it, but I got to assume they're giving you a little bit of a rundown of the plot of the movie all the way through. And then that iconic image. Yeah, that's great. I got a couple of soul records by two different Bobbies. One that you'll know and one that you probably won't know. I'll start with the one you know. Bobby Bland. Bobby Bland being a favourite of mine, really from his debut, Two Steps from the Blues, which is, I think, one of the better, if not the best, blues soul crossover records. And this one is right up there. Easily his best record of the 70s. This is Reflections in Blue. And part of the reason that this record is so successful compared to some of his other efforts in the 70s is that this is a return to the blues. And the clues in the name, in the sleeve, everything about it. It has the third track on side 2, 5 Long Years, which I think is probably the best singular track he ever recorded. It's a really beautiful, quite heartbreaking ballad with really lovely guitar motifs, and his voice just works perfectly. Now, you think of the blues and you think, well, maybe this is more the soul. You think soul music, and of course you think Memphis, and to a certain extent, Detroit, of course, and others. But you don't really think Nashville. There's another genre that you might think of if I were to say Nashville. But Bobby Powell was a really interesting soul singer, and I love that sleeve. And he was based out of Nashville. And you can kind of hear that a little bit in not so much the music, but maybe his phrasing and kind of the tone that he takes. He had a big hit with his song CC Rider, which had been number one on the R&B charts for quite some time when this record came out. There he is. It's think James Carr or maybe I'm trying to get the right comparison for you. Each song is kind of 2.5 to 3.5 minutes of a little bit of soul nuggety goodness. Really lovely record. I've had this one for ages, and I've never seen a duplicate come along. So again, I was quite pleased when this happened. And this Contempo label is not really one that I know very well. I really like the quality of this one. I like how it sounds a lot. So now I've got a couple of compilations of two people who will need no introduction. But these compilations are in my collection. I love them to bits, which is why I'm talking about them here. I'm just going to slide the obi along here, because actually it makes it a bit easier if the obi is on this side. But this is Stop in the Name of Love, the best of the Supremes with obi. And there they are on the back. It is just quality from start to finish. Songs like I Hear a Symphony are revelatory even to this day. And then I've got Marvin Gaye's Best Of. This is by a mile the best compilation album of Marvin Gaye. There's a little excerpt of his history there, and we were just talking about Diana Ross, and there's a beautiful picture of him with Diana Ross. So what is it about this record? I love the quality of the vinyl, but listen to this. What's going on? Let's get it on. You're a special part of me. Pride and joy. How sweet it is. You are everything. I heard it through the grapevine. Mercy, mercy me. Trouble man, and more. It is the distillation of everything great. Zero filler, all killer on the best collection, Marvin Gaye. I always like to have a curve. I'm gonna save the curveball because I've also got this Wilson Pickett's astounding classic debut album, The Sound of Wilson Pickett from 1967. Arguably one of the greatest soul records of the 60s. Funky Broadway and all. And this one's in beautiful condition if you don't have that record. I got two really lovely ones to finish. One, I can't really give you a genre on it other than it's, Americana weirdness. And the other is soul disco. I'm going to start here. This is very rare indeed. This is the white label promo, which I left over there, but it is the white label promo of the debut album from 67, maybe 68, of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, who's, I believe they're still going to this day. This kind of folksy country, but the thing is, these 60s records that they did, look at it, by the way. Who thought it a good idea to bring their banjos and their bits and pieces and sit on a really dirty digger? It's quite excavator. I don't know what you call it. It's bizarre. And there they are. And the sleeve notes are this kind of psychedelic kind of weirdness. It's all... There are some electronic touches to this record. It kind of burbles at places, but it's also almost like a clash of cultures, because you get songs like the opening track, which is Bye For Me the Rain, which was probably their biggest hit, albeit not one that you would really consider a hit, which you can clearly hear the Beatles' psychedelia influence. But then you get something like Dismal Swamp, which is a terrible name because it's actually really good. It should be called Should be good. Should be called The Really Quite Good Swamp, which is effectively a competition to dueling banjos. It's just two banjos playing. It's really weird and interesting and a bit schizophrenic. Super rare. This record has no entry on Discogs. This is from 1967, this white label promo. The normal record is on Discogs and sold once years ago for $70. So it's a really rare and quite intriguing record, well worth a listen. And then finally, I'm going to go with this, which is the MFSB's Love Is The Message. MFSB being the house band for Philadelphia International Records, one of the great soul labels of the 70s. Big competition with Stax and Muscle Shoals, etc. Atlantic. This is a wonderful record. Now this record though, you can clearly hear the influence of disco. And so what that means is you get a song like TSOP, which is a song that opens side 2, which became a massive hit in America because it was the theme music to Soul Train, which was a huge TV show in the late 70s, early 80s. You can see the pictures of the band in the studio. I really like this record because it's clash of two styles, but taste wins out because it's still a beautiful thing. And this record took on a life of its own, particularly into the mid and late 90s, where many hip-hop artists and collectives were sampling liberally from this record because there are really cool string motifs and there are break beats and drops and things that lent itself perfectly to the hip-hop scene. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful record. Little political subtleties in the kind of watercolor imagery. Highly recommended. If you've never heard it before, give it a listen. There you have it. Soul, psychedelic country soundtracks, funk and blues. That's shortcuts for you. Love it. If you like the video, I love the comments. Send me a message, like it, all that kind of good stuff. Hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, the next one's going to be interesting as well. Okay, thanks everyone.